right, so happy Tuesday. Here we are again for closing sake. For closing sake. Like Debbie said, for closing sake. And let's close on time. I like that. Let's close on time. So for closing sake, our conversation today is closing costs. Let's talk about how to estimate closing costs and how to so selfish reasons, huh, Jackie? Jackie said, just so she can review over and over and over again. How do you estimate closing costs? How to review a settlement statement, and also how to use a closing calculator to, as you prepare for your listing presentations, as you prepare for closing. And you'll see, once we switch over to the closing calculator, there's also additional features when you're working with buyers, estimating what their cost may be with the lender. Also the cost of renting versus buying. And so there's a number of uses. Today we lead off talking about closing costs as it relates to buyers and sellers and transactions. Also, we're going to look at a seller net sheet. Make sure we're in here. So as we know, the mission of Title Tuesdays is to provide a weekly coaching call for my realtor colleagues to discuss the latest trends, issues, need to know information to grow your business, That's what this is all about. We love coming in and chatting and checking in with each other and saying hello and happy Tuesday. But at the end of the day, all of this is to grow your business. And so the birth of Title Tuesdays for closing sake was just birthed out of all the questions that I get from realtor colleagues as it relates to not just the business, as it relates to title, as it relates to the closing process, as it relates to the contract, as it relates to all things real estate. And so in lieu of, instead of just having the one-on-one conversations, I said, you know what, let's all come together. Let's have this quick conversation. I would love to be able to share this information with more than one person, right? And to think, you guys, that if I give you this information and you go and share it with another, how much we've duplicated that impact. And so one thing that I know is oftentimes the questions do sometimes come in a panic, right? Like, oh my God, this is it. I'm going to have to cancel my deal. And that's not always the case. It's simply that there was something else that needed to be learned as it relates to that particular issue. And so you guys know my quote. I say, when you encounter an issue that impedes your forward progress, you have not reached a dead end. You have simply reached the extent of your knowledge. That's it. You've learned all that you know. Right. And so that's even why we make the call. That's why we reach out and say, well, can I ask you a question about this? Because I've reached the extent of my knowledge. So I'm at a dead end at this point. So this is why we come together to grow your knowledge. Right. And the ambition is that as you grow your knowledge, you are also going to grow your income. Right. That's what this is all about. I mean, I don't want you to just learn it and just store it. I want you to learn more so that you earn more. I mean, let's just be frank about it. No one goes to, 18, 24 years of school just for knowledge sakes. I'm sure there's a few people, but for all intents and purposes, those degrees, those licenses, those credentials or certificates are all for the purpose of increasing income, increasing revenue. Learn more to earn more, right? So for those who I have not had an opportunity to meet before, welcome to Title Xperts, Title Tuesdays. Just a little bit about us. We are a settlement firm. We are founded in Florida by myself. I'm a real estate attorney. We offer settlement services throughout the entire state of Florida. The obvious choice we offer settlement services is just because of the benefits of working with us. And so on the screen, you see here some of the features of our services. We are an attorney managed firm, a la myself and my partner. And so the benefit of that is obviously as legal issues are encountered, we're able to address those from a neutral standpoint, give some neutral advice depending upon who we're representing, and then also make sure that that closings are conducted from a legal compliant place. Many of you may know that in Florida, it is not necessary that you be an attorney to conduct closings. However, That is one of the major benefits of working with title experts. Outside of that, we do have a dedicated closing team. That's important that you know when you call in, you're not talking to a bunch of different people. You're talking to a specific person, your team that's dedicated to you and your closing file. Additionally, weekly status updates. What is the benefit of that? One of the biggest complaints that's always received is no one's telling me what's going on, that I have to reach out and ask for status. Well, one thing that we provide, if you guys follow me on social media, you know that we do a daily huddle. We meet every day concerning closings, files that are leading up to closings, to issue spot, to make sure that files are moving forward. And then in turn, that status update is provided to the clients, the buyers, the sellers, the realtors, the lenders, all parties that are involved in the transaction. And then finally, helpful closing guides, documents. In addition to these in-person or on video calls, we do provide closing guides. Here's some tools to help your clients move through the closing process and have a better understanding of what closing is about. And then, hey, if you get a rush deal, someone wants to pay cash just as quickly as we could get title clear, and get those title searches in, we are more than willing to close you. So those are some of the features and benefits of working with title experts. On screen, you hear see some of our frontline staff. A couple of them are actually on the call. Myself, my partner, my assistant closing manager, Kiara and Jai, just to put a face with some of the names. Now, about myself, for those who I have not had the chance to meet personally, my name is Ray Cole Jackson. I am the founder of Title Experts. A little bit about myself, my credentials. I am originally from Miami, Florida. I attended the University of Florida, where I obtained my bachelor's of arts degree in criminology. Go Gators. Those who've been on the call, you know what we say. No no's on here. If you do want to say go no's, get your own training. I'm just kidding. No, I'm serious, but I obtained my Juris Doctorate from Santa Clara University of Florida in California, moved back here to Florida, where I obtained my LLM. He said, sorry, not sorry, where I obtained my LLM in real property development from the University of Miami School of Law. I'm originally from Miami. And I'm also a licensed realtor in Florida. I got my first real estate license in California while in law school. When I moved back home to Florida, I got my license here in Florida. Uh-oh, Debbie, does that mean you're a no? She said, I plead the fifth. Here's the purpose of this. The purpose of this is to just say that, listen, what you guys are seeing in the marketplace, I am, and will see. Oftentimes when they say, oh, I'm going to call my attorney, it's for the purposes of pretty much halting a deal. I can tell you that that is not our ambition. That is not our goal. That's not my goal. I understand that you don't get paid until deals close. And obviously we do not get paid either on the title side until deals close. In addition to that, there may be some unique situations, nuances. We're not going to ask you to do things just to clear title that we know doesn't make sense as it relates to the transaction, right? Because again, this was the entire purpose of Title Experts, why it was built this way. And also, it also gives you some perspective as to when we have these conversations. I want you to know that I'm not coming from just a theoretical standpoint, not just theory, but also practice. Again, done the things, did the showings, did all the things. And so just want to bring a full 360-degree conversation to you guys as it relates to these topics each week. With that being said, we're talking about closing costs. That's the flight we're taking today. I love when they say, if you were expecting to arrive at some other destination, you should exit now before we take off. No, okay. Closing costs and reviewing the settlement statement. All right. So from the top, the first thing we need to know is, what are the contractual closing costs that we're even discussing, right? And so we see here a screenshot of our FAR as is contract. When we talk about closing costs, these are specifically what we're talking about. We're talking about the doc stamps. We're talking about the title policies for the owner and the lender. We're talking about the title search. We're talking about the municipal lien search. We're talking about the HOA estoppels. We're talking about recording costs and fees. Are there any seller attorney's fees? And of course, we're talking about what? We're talking about your transaction fee, which is usually in other, right? We're talking about the survey. We're talking about application fees. All that goes along with your representation of a buyer and seller in the purchase and sale transaction. I know for sure that when it gets to this conversation, it can get a little bit rocky if you've never had this type of training before. And so the purpose is to be able to comfortably have this conversation with your buyer and your seller about the closing costs, what they are, estimate what they will probably be, as well as how to have the discussion as it relates to the settlement statement once they get to closing. So again, from the purchase and sale contract, this is paragraph 9. And we know that our contract is broken out. It says cost to be paid by the seller, and then it says cost to be paid by the buyer. Now, if you drop down to line 129, 30, 31, 139, you see it says if 9C is 9C1 is selected, 9C2 is selected, 9C3 selected. And if you've been in my contract class before, we provided a framework, which we are going to look at again later on today, to provide some clarity around it. That's almost like a matrix. So what do you mean if this is selected, right? So that's the first point to understand, which closing costs are we even talking about? So these are those. Now, when it's talking about if 9C1 is selected, 9C2 is selected, 9C3 is selected, it's talking about who selects a title agent. Now, hopefully this is clear enough on your screen. The graphic itself, this is actually a screenshot from a flyer that I will have sent out to you guys that gives you an idea of what's customary as it relates to each county in Florida for who selects a title agent and who pays the settlement cost, right? I want to make a point that it's not mandatory. It is not a contractual requirement that, for example, as we see here in the graphic, Miami-Dade Broward, we see that is, as I call it, Title Xperts Gold, which means that generally the buyer selects. That's what is customary. That is not what is required. I want to make that abundantly clear. Similarly, in Palm Beach County, it's white. It says that seller customarily selects and pays, but that's not always the case. We receive contracts all the time in Palm Beach County where the buyer is responsible for selecting the title agent and paying for their owner's policy. Does that make sense? So I'm going to send this out, and so you'll know what's customary in each particular county, but it is not a requirement. It's absolutely not a requirement, right? So here is from our contract 9C1, 9C2, and 9C3. Remember back in section 9, it said if 9C1 is selected, this line item is paid for by the seller. If 9C2 is selected, this item is paid for by the buyer, et cetera, et cetera. So this is your 9C1, this is your 9C2, and this is your 9C3. For the purposes of our call, I'm going to go ahead and read through these. 9C1 says, if you select 9C1, it says seller shall designate the closing agent and pay for the owner's policy and charges. And the buyer shall pay the premiums for buyer's lender's policy and charges for closing services related to lender's policy. What does that mean? You know that at closing, when there's a finance transaction, two policies are issued. There's an owner's policy that is issued to the buyer. There's a lender's policy that is issued to the lender. What that line is saying that if 9C1 is selected, the seller is going to pay for the owner's policy and the costs associated with issuing that policy. The buyer is going to pay for the lender's policy and the costs associated with issuing that policy. Going on to line 160, it says endorsements and loan closing, which amount shall be paid by the buyer to closing agent or such other providers as buyer may select. Or now we're going to 9C2. Buyer selects a closing agent and pays for the owner's policy and charges for closing services related to buyer's lender's policy, endorsements, and loan closing. So 9C1 is seller selects the closing agent and pays for the owner's policy. 9C2 is buyer selects the closing agent and pays for the owner's policy. You see, one thing that has not changed between these two they're both are still saying that the buyer will pay for the lender's policy and the costs associated with that. Now, the third is what's called the Miami-Dade Broward Regional Provision. It says the seller shall furnish a copy of the prior owner's policy of title insurance or other evidence of title. I just want to let you guys know, if they don't have it, don't freak out. It'll be okay. It just allows for the title agent to provide what we call a reissuance credit if the seller's title policy was issued within 3 years of this transaction's closing. If the seller purchased the property 2 years ago, they have their owner's policy, the title agent is able to give a credit on the policy that's going to be issued at this closing. If they purchased 30 years ago, it's okay. Don't try and find the policy. Don't stress yourself out. We'll be okay. All right. Now, going on to line 165, it says that the seller will furnish the prior owner's policy or other evidence of title and pay for fees for continuation or update of such title evidence. All that means is a title search. They're going to pay for the title search. That's what that means. Continuation or update, that's the title search, which is acceptable to buyer's title insurance underwriter for reissue of coverage. The seller's going to pay for the tax search and municipal lien search. That saying, the seller will pay for the search. They're going to provide their prior policy if they have it, and they're going to pay for the searches. That's what that says. Going on to line 167, buyers shall obtain and pay for post-closing continuation and premium of buyers. Let me not skip that part. Buyers shall obtain and pay for post-closing continuation. That language means buyers paying for the owner's policy. Post-closing continuation of that policy. Buyers paying for their policy. And the premium for buyer's owner's policy, and if applicable, buyer's lender's policy. All right? Sellers should not be obligated to pay more than whatever that number is, if left blank, than $200 for the abstract continuation or title search. That means you can cap the max cost for the title search that the seller is going to pay for. All right. Having understood this, remember, let's start back here. I'm going to jump back just so we're clear on some principles. Having understood that these are the closing costs that we're discussing, having understood that these 3 provisions dictate who's going to pay these delineated closing costs, and having understood that this map provides you with the guide of who customarily selects and pays for the closing costs as it relates to the county that the property is located in, let's go ahead and flesh out what that looks like when each selection is made. So 9C1. 9C1 said, remember we read it, it says seller will designate the closing agent and pay for owner's policy and charges. Buyer will pay for lender's policy and charge related to the closing. Here you go. Here's what that looks like. This is all of those fees broken out on each side. If 9C1 is selected, the seller is paying for the doc stamps on the deed. They're paying for the association estoppel. They're paying for the owner's title insurance policy. They're paying the title search, the municipal lien search, other costs to secure title, and then paragraph 11, costs to maintain and repair. Now, just to put a little bit of flesh or meat on the bones as it relates to doc stamps. Doc stamp is taxes on the purchase price. If the purchase price is $500,000, there's going to be a tax paid on that purchase price amount of $500,000. What you need to understand is that is statutory. Each county has their tax rate. That is not determined by the title agent. Right? What else is statutory? The policies. That rate is going to be the same. You will not, you can get a credit. We have what's called entitled a butler's credit, where the title agent can essentially reduce the payment that's made to them, but the rate, the actual calculation of the policy, that is defined by the state. Everybody uses the same rate. What should we put there on, or the average cost? That's a good question. I would say the average cost okay, so it's to everyone. Just want to make sure that everyone saw your question, Stacy. The average cost for a title search, that's tough, but I'm gonna say about I'm gonna say about 150 to 175, because title agents charge differently. Be very honest with you, but it's about 150 to 175 for line 68. Let me see. Go back to where you at. 68. Yeah. 175 should definitely have you within the range, and if it isn't, they shouldn't have contracted and agreed to it. Jenny said, can the buyer pay the doc stamp taxes? Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question. The buyer can pay all of these closing costs. The seller can pay all of these closing costs. This contract is written as a base starting point. What the parties agree to is completely up to them. We actually just had a contract come in today. You get that a lot when you have an investor, a buyer investor. They'll say, I'll pay all the closing costs because they're getting a good deal, right? I'll pay all the closing costs. Or let's say, for example, if you're in a buyer's market and seller really needs to sell, and some type of way they've negotiated, they figured out that if the seller pays, you've seen contracts where the seller will pay up to $3,500 of buyer's closing costs, or seller will pay all of buyer's closing costs. So that allocation is absolutely negotiable. That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. Going on the title search, again, that was a good question. We asked what would you charge right now? Ours is at $100. Again, everybody's is different. Municipal lien search, this is something that you need to know that varies by each municipality. Some municipalities charge more than others. If it needs to be rushed, some charge more than others. Some right now, they're doing a little bit better, but some right now are not even, well, before during the pandemic, a rush was not even an option. But I'll tell you, like, for example, in Boca, rush fee, $400 or $500. So you might want to keep that into consideration when you are putting your closing dates in your contracts, right? Recording costs, let's flip over to the buyer side. Recording costs for mortgage and deed. There's a recording cost for pages. That's what this line is speaking to, the number of pages. The buyer is responsible for that cost. Then there's also a cost for taxes on the mortgage. So using hypothetical, $500,000 purchase price, $400,000 mortgage. The buyer is going to pay the taxes on that $400,000 mortgage. They're also going to pay the taxes on the pages of the mortgage. Let's say the mortgage is 12 pages. I think that's about $18. Gail, tell me if I'm wrong. And then no, more than that. $18 is for the deed. And the mortgage is about, see, there you go. And the mortgage is about one something. What is it, Gail? Tell me what 12 pages, about 12 pages on a mortgage is. So you're going to see your buyer paying for the pages to record the deed. They're also going to pay for the pages on the mortgage, and then they're going to pay the taxes on the mortgage, while the seller is still paying the taxes on the deed itself, right? The $500,000. And then again, you know that the buyer is going to pay for the lender's title insurance policy. One thing that you should know here is that we have what's called a simultaneous issuance credit, and that allows for the lender's policy to be significantly less than it would be as it compares to the owner's policy. So the owner's policy, there you go, 12 pages is $103.50. So let's say, for example, your owner's policy is $1,300. As a simultaneous issuance for the lender's policy can be $250, $275. It is significantly less than the owner's policy. The survey costs what they cost. These are what we call pass-throughs. That's the other thing to understand too. This is a pass-through, meaning that although this is being collected at closing by the title agent, they're not making this money. This is a pass-through. We're going to write a check to the county. We're going to write a check to the surveyor. We're going to write a check to the company that's going to provide the lien search, et cetera, the estoppel. Those are absolute pass-through. And then the HOA application and transfer fees, right? This is if 9C1 is selected. What you see primarily is that the owner's policy and the searches for the policy are on the seller side. 9C2 is selected, it flips. You guys see how it's heavy now on the buyer side? Because now the owner's policy and the searches, these three, are on the buyer side. So you have 9C1, which is fully seller side for those costs, seller's responsibility for those three costs. You have 9C2, which is fully buyer's responsibility for those three costs. These are the three costs that move around. As it relates to 9C1, 2, and 3, there's only three costs that are moving around, guys. It's the owner's policy, the title search, and the lien search. Those are the only three that are shifting based on which one you select. And someone would say, well, why would you select it? It's all about dollars. At the end of the day, it gets down to net proceeds, right? And so if the seller's saying, listen, I need all my coins, you need to pay for, you can select the title agent, you pay for the policy, you pay for the searches. That's really all it boils down to, guys. So we're at 9C2, and you see that the owner's policy, the title search, and the lien search is on the buyer side. We just flipped it. Now 9C3, we call that like a split the baby. The owner's policy is on the buyer side. The searches are on the seller side. So they took those three and they split them. They put the searches on the seller side, the owner's policy on the buyer side. Voila. So now this whole mush, you guys are good. Now you know. These are all the fees. 9C1, the three that move are on the seller side. 9C2, the three that move are on the buyer side. 9C3, the three that move, two are on the seller side, which is the searches, and the policy is on the buyer side. Worth the cost of admission, right? Now, here's a term that you need to know, prorations, because that's going to come up a lot. Proration simply means you are allocating to each party their pro rata share of the expense. Where does this usually come up? This comes up with property taxes. You see here, this is a screenshot of a settlement statement. You know that we have in Florida, we have specifically South region, we have what's called ad valorem taxes and non-ad valorem taxes. Ad valorem taxes are value taxes. This tax is based on the value of the property. Non-ad valorem taxes are not based on the value of the property. They're based on resources, services, amenities that service the property that the homeowner is responsible for their pro rata share of: sidewalks, lighting, redevelopment projects. And so you will see those two costs broken out on the settlement statement separately because they have different fiscal years. County taxes, which are your ad valorem taxes, they are paid in what's called in the arrears, meaning they are paid after they become due. They're paid at the end of the year. So this is why on your settlement statement, guys, you're going to see the seller charged, that's what debit means, for their portion, their pro rata share of the annual taxes, and the buyer is getting a credit. They're getting a credit because by the time taxes become due in November, December, January, February, they're going to be the ones responsible paying for them. But the seller needs to pay, credit the buyer for their pro rata share for the days that they were in ownership. So that's what you have to understand. Proration is simply saying this cost is spread over how many days? Is it spread over 365? Is it spread over half a year? Is it spread over a week? Is it spread over a month? Is it spread over a quarter? Okay. And then how many days out of that measure are you responsible for? And that's called a proration. We're going to put on your side what you're responsible for, and we're going to put on the buyer side what they're responsible for. So when you see these figures like this, where you see, and this is an all to settlement statement, guys, you guys, and I use this because I like this one. This one is easier to see the two sides. Not like the CD has it too, but it's a little different. The closing disclosure. When you see fees on both sides on a particular line item, that's a proration. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about how you can come up with one of these on your own outside of our office. Sometimes we get calls. Oh, let me go to it. Sometimes we get calls. I'm going to pull it up here. Oh, can you send me a draft alta? Guys, it is 2021. You can do this, and you can do it all night long with all different scenarios. Do you address the property tax that will increase for the buyer in the following year, and that they can go back to the seller for credit, higher pro rata for year? Good question. So I'm going to answer. So Kathy's question is generally the property taxes will increase in the following year because the property taxes are based on value, right? And so let's say your seller purchased the property at $250,000. Their ad valorem taxes, their value taxes are based on that 50 and the incremental increases that the county assessed. Your buyer is going to purchase at $500,000, and they're also not going to have where you really see the jump, Kathy, and we discussed this at closing. Actually, if you ever, well, we discussed it at closing. I can't say that everybody goes over this accurately, but where you see the jump that Kathy is asking about is if your previous owner, your seller, is an investor, or otherwise it was not their homestead property. Because we know that the homestead property causes the taxes to be significantly lower. And understanding that if taxes are paid in arrear, the tax assessor goes and they issue the tax bill. The tax bill is going to be with a non-homestead exemption for that entire year. And the buyer is going to be responsible for paying that. When we close, we use last year's tax bill. So let me go back to our example. This figure that we use, 1646.49, that came from 2019's tax bill. We have no way of knowing what this year's tax bill is going to be. So we use that tax bill as what we call an estimate. What ends up happening is when that tax bill is in fact issued at the end of the year towards October, November, it is issued in November, becomes due in November. What happens is if that tax bill is significantly higher, we have no way of knowing. The buyer will know because now they've gotten a tax bill. Let's use, for example, this one is 1646.49. Let's say, for example, that bill actually comes out at the end of the year for $2,646.49 instead of $16,046.49. That's a pretty significant difference. And I think the buyer is going to want to be recoup the difference, right? Because their proration is not right. Now we should have prorated $2,646.49 over the seller's ownership period, not 1646. And so what happens is, to answer your question, Kathy, what happens is you can do two things. If you know that the property is non-homestead, there is on some county websites the ability to estimate the taxes without the homestead exemption on some county websites, and you can notify title and title can use that number. What does happen customarily is when the parties close in their settlement documents, there is an agreement that in the event that these you understand that we use last year's tax bill to estimate what this year's taxes are. In the event that the taxes are different, the parties agree to come together to shore up that difference. That's the language that we use. You're going to keep us out of it. Like, we're not going to be responsible for forcing the seller to credit the buyer for the difference. However, the seller has signed an affidavit agreeing that they will. and the buyer has done the same. So the buyer has recourse in the event that, using our hypothetical, that tax bill comes out at $2,646 instead of the $1,646 that we use at closing. They absolutely have recourse. Most title agents have that language in their closing documents. I'm not even going to assume that there's going to be a difference regardless of where you close. It should be in there. That's a standard document. We simply kind of have it in ours about 3 times, right? So very good question there. Oh, the last point I want to make is I don't believe I made this point. We talked about the ad valorem taxes being paid in arrears, fiscal year being January 1 to December 31st. The non-ad valorem taxes, they're paid in advance. They are October 1 to September 30th of the following year, the next year. So you're going to see a debit to the buyer on your settlement statement, as you see here, and a credit to the seller. Right? So similar to the ad valorem taxes, the non-ad valorem taxes have already been paid for the buyer by the seller because those are paid in advance. So since something has been paid in advance, I'm not going to be living in the property. I need to be credited for the days that I've already paid for that I'm not living in the property. So you'll see a credit to the buyer for non-ad valorem and a debit to the seller. I'm sorry, a credit to the seller and a debit to the buyer for non-ad valorem. You see a debit to the seller, credit to the buyer for ad valorem on your settlement statement. Since you asked. All right. So let's go to using the closing calculator. On our website, if you go to our website, www.titleexperts.com, if you go here to expert estimates, it will take you to a site, this site where you can log in. If you've already logged in, you log in. If not, you can click here to sign up for a free account. So I'm already logged in. As a matter of fact, let me just go back. Let me see if I can go back here.
It's gonna hurt your doggone self. Stop doing silly stuff.
All right. So once you log in, this is what you'll see. And so here is a list of all the estimates that you can prepare. Remember, I mentioned rent versus buy, affordability, buyer estimate. Here's if your seller has multiple offers, how to compare the multiple offers, see which is best. Seller net sheet. Here's what you need to, this is one for where you need to sell to net. This is how you work backwards, right? Closing disclosure quote, loan estimate quote. This is obviously for a buyer. So this is what we're using. We can use let's do a title quote. Now, one thing about the, let's do a seller net sheet. One thing about the system is it does what's called predictive text, and it'll fill in. And so we're going to use this property as an example. Property address is 1042. You're going to put in whatever your property address is. 1042 Northwest. See, it's starting to guess what our property is. 182nd Way in Pembroke Pines. Is that us? Yeah. All right. So what's our sales price? Let's continue with our hypothetical. We said 500,000. Our closing date. Let's move that. No, that's fine because we're 8-3. That works. Now, here's what we have done with this app that actually was not done before we started using it. We have them having created a drop down for where it says who pays for title insurance, what is default for this state or county. So with our app, this map is already built in. And this was not, surprisingly, this was not provided to the developer before we started using it. And so when you allow this to say what's default for this state or county, it's going to default to this. So you don't have to kind of worry about, quote unquote, which one you should select as if you start, branching out to other counties in Florida. So we have an option here that says what's default for this county. Now, if you don't want to do that, then you can go ahead and select 9C1, 9C2, 9C3. right? So we've customized this app to match what the contract provides for. So we're going to go ahead and do the default for this state or county, which is Miami-Dade Broward provision. That's what that's going to be here. All right, and I'll go ahead and even change it to that. Now, you're doing a seller net sheet. So let's say your seller has a loan of 200,000. Do they have a second? Let's just for kicks, let's give them $25,000 second loan. Commission. What's your commission? 3. Cooperating agent. Can we see the map again? Sure. Do you know I'm gonna have them send it out because this is a screenshot of an actual flyer that we give out when in the in-person class. 6% total. I'm gonna have it, and so you'll be able to actually see the counties. All right. All right. Stacy's being fair. Stacy said give the cooperating agent 3% as well. I've seen some of y'all contracts, 2%. No, I'm just kidding. Transaction fee. Customary is $395. Let's leave it there. Homeowner association dues. Let's say they're 200. Let's say that they did pay them this month. Is there a transfer fee that the seller needs to pay? We'll say no, because again, we want the per the contract, the buyer's supposed to pay that. But if you've negotiated that the seller will pay it, then you would put that in. Property taxes. This is how this closing calculator gets very accurate, as some others are not. I've already pulled this property up on the property tax page. And so here's the annual tax bill. Let's see what this says. Now we're going to take this full number. It does not break out the two. We're going to take the full amount and place it in here. And again, this is an estimate. Once it gets to, okay, got her first listing at 6.5%. Go ahead, Stacy. We're going to take the full amount and do the math here. See, this is broken out, ad valorem, non-ad valorem. We're going to take the full amount, 6192.72 plus 3965.63, $10,158.35. Any other seller expenses or credit? Let's say you're doing a seller credit of $1,500. Somebody signing in already. Who's that? Who's that? Tamika Daniels, you win the raffle. I'm just kidding. It's freaking you out, huh? It tells us that you signed up. So calculate, but you're smart. I like how you think, girl. Use it. Don't sit here, just watch me. Let's go. All right, so here's the net sheet. Seller nets, $231,639.37. So here's some updates. So right here, you see the settlement fee is $695. The title search here, $150. We actually have to update that because we have a new underwriter. We're always trying to negotiate for good fees. We have a new fee from our underwriter. The lien search, $250. Again, that's a pass-through. You got to let your clients know that's a pass-through. We don't know what the fee is actually going to be, but that's a pretty, some are higher than that, some are lower than that, but that puts you in the middle. So we're not trying to have too much of a conversation. Association estoppel, they average around $350. Obviously, if you know your property is not in an association, so $350 won't be necessary, then you can go ahead and just add that to this net, or you can also do a credit. Deed recording fee, $0. Remember, they're not responsible for recording the pages. Mortgage recording, $0. They're not responsible for the pages. Now the doc stamps, there you go, $3,500. They are responsible for that. We have their payoffs on there. We have the commissions on there. We have the transaction fee. We have the county property taxes. Remember, this is the proration we talked about. The seller is debited. Here it says, the language that says credit from seller, which means debit, right? And the credit to the buyer. Here's the homeowners association dues, because we said that they didn't pay them yet. This is the charge to them. And then this is the credit we said we give them. Pretty easy, right? Now I'm going to send this to, so you can see what this looks like. Key to no PM. And you could just send this to yourself. I'm sending it to Tamika because I have her email address. Download it as a PDF. Now you have it there. You can also save it, email it, and then if you need to go back and make edits, you can do that as well. Let's do a credit for what we give a seller a credit for. Let's say HOA prepayment. Let's say sometimes we've had that. Let's say the seller has a balance of $750 with the HOA. Now it's increased, right? Gino says send it to him. All right. Look. Same thing. You can do it for a buyer. Estimate what their costs are going to be. There's so many different tools, monthly affordability, rent versus buy. Again, now that you guys know what the closing costs are, now that you know what should be allocated where, I welcome you to sign up for this calculator and then just run the numbers, run the numbers, run the numbers. The market is a little bit different in that this is a seller's market, so you're not necessarily always trying to squeeze values, right? But even look at this, like what is their interest rate? This is the rent versus buy calculator. What would their interest rate be? Rent appreciation, meaning rent is going to increase every year, right? So we know, renter, you're going to increase your rent payment every year, plus your insurance, etc. Here's what it's costing you to continue renting versus buying. So you have all those calculators here as well. All right. Any questions on the calculator? All right. Clear as mud. I want y'all to go and play with that calculator again. It's the truth. It is the best, one of the best tools that we can offer to you. So here's why, again, when you reach out to us and say, can I get a draft settlement statement? I'm going to say, go on the website, sign up. That's better than anything we can do, right? So in that case, you can be prepared. You can be preparing for you can do this at your appointment. Just go on the website, put in the information, and your seller may say, okay, well, what about if we do it at $450? What if we do it at $425? Okay, well, what if we sell it at $495? Isn't that a great opportunity to be able to say, okay, well, what number do you think? And they said, well, I don't know what my payoff is. It might be 200,000. Okay, well, if your payoff is 200,000, this is where you're net. Oh, but you know what? Oh, you know what? Maybe I think I might have a second too, because I did have a HELOC, right? So you just sitting at the table, putting in all their different variables. All right. Oh, thanks, Debbie. So listen, with that being said, here's our closing thought. In closing, listen, I hope that you guys found value in our conversation today. I hope that you guys will take about 30 minutes. Take about 30 minutes to go and sign up for that app and to get some knowledge and understanding about how to work through that. The recording of the class will be posted within 24 hours to our YouTube page. If you don't already follow us or subscribe to our YouTube page, do that so that you can go back and As was said, review this over and over again until you get an understanding. I suggest do a quick screenshot of that table that lays out the closing costs, who pays for what based on which is selected. And I hope that after today's conversation, you're like, I can tell you, just lay them out, because the whole goal is to bring clarity around that. So with that being said, in closing thoughts, guys, listen, don't ever let failure break you. Let it make you. You got to understand that failure is going to come, but failure is only defined as when you come to a hurdle and you stop. Thomas Edison said, I never failed. I found a couple thousand different ways that did not work on my way to inventing these different inventions, right? He said, I never failed. I found 1,000 different ways that did not work. And so don't let failure break you, guys. Don't let failure slow you down. It's simply just diverting you, taking you on another path. It is teaching you. Let failure make you. The last quote I'll leave you with is of Jeff Bezos. You guys know, if you know me, you know as Jeff Bezos for president. He said, I'm reading a book and there's a quote where he says, I wish you could, he said, you guys see all of my successes. I wish you could see my scar tissue. I wish you could see my scar tissue. I wish you could see the scar tissue of the inventions, of the ideas, of the projects, of the innovations that did not necessarily take off. But guess what? You only have to be right once, and all of a sudden you're legendary. And so I just ask that you guys not allow failure as you're learning, as you're working through processes, to break you, but please allow it to make you learn from it, pivot, add to it, and then you'll absolutely make yourself legendary. Don't let failure break you, let it make you. Now, next week's class is systems and tools to run your business like a business. I know that last week I got ahead of myself. I said we were talking about lead gen, and this class today is what was on schedule. Next week, we are moving into systems and tools to run your business like a business. Listen, guys, I got to tell you something. I definitely know title like the back of my hand. I know the contract, I know legal and all of that. But at the end of the day, guess what I like? I like business. I like systems, tools. I like revenue generation. You guys see my office as a constant reminder of, at the end of the day, we learn more to earn more, right? I have all these books, not just to read, they're great, but at the end of the day, it's to move forward towards freedom, financial freedom, leverage, and prosperity. So next week, we're talking about systems and tools to run your business like a business. Real estate school taught you how to get the license. They didn't teach you how to run your business. We're going to start having that conversation on our Tuesday calls. I hope to see you guys next week. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. You have my information. I do get your emails, so shoot me an email message if you have any questions. The site, absolutely. The site is, get out of here, Title Xperts, titlexperts.com. It is our homepage. Can you see that? Okay. Titlexperts.com. Hey, Makwa, no problem. Listen, you'll get an email. Thanks, Dave. You'll get an email with the recording. Also, if you go on our YouTube page and subscribe, you should get a notification when it's posted there within 24 hours. Stacy, I look forward to seeing you next week. Yes, make action become your process. I know that. You're welcome, Marianella. Ray, always good to see you. I'll use you for my hypothetical next week. Rona, been in real estate, and still, absolutely, we're going to continue learning. We're going to continue learning. It's babysitting day. It's fine. You're welcome, Kim. Have a blessed day, Stacy. Jackie, thanks so much for being early. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Donna, good to see you. Richard is my attendance taker. Richard gets there early. All right, guys. I will see you guys next Tuesday. Systems and tools to run your business like a business. Listen, go get them. Have a blessed week. Until next week.